Have you ever wondered how some objects survive thousands of years, carrying secrets we may never fully understand? Welcome to Timeless Mysteries, the place where history's most puzzling relics are brought back to life in calm detail. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's begin. The secret strength of Roman concrete. The story of Roman concrete begins not with the towering Colosseum or the aqueducts that still stretch across the Italian countryside, but with something far simpler. A small handful of powdery dust scooped from the slopes of a volcanic mountain. The Romans did not invent the idea of mortar, for people before them had mixed lime with water to create binding substances. What they did, however, was take that familiar idea and turn it into something entirely new, something that could outlast empires. The ash that they gathered, known to us as pozzolana, was volcanic in origin, and when it was mixed with lime and water, it created a reaction unlike anything the ancient world had seen before. This humble mixture became the hidden force behind the resilience of Roman architecture. To appreciate why Roman concrete matters, imagine walking through the ruins of Rome today. Columns lie broken, roofs have collapsed, marble has been stripped away, yet many of the concrete cores remain solid. The Pantheon's massive dome, still intact after nearly 2,000 years, is a testimony not to marble or bronze, but to this extraordinary blend of ash and lime. At first glance, it might look unremarkable, just a gray stone-like substance. Yet within its matrix lies a chemistry so advanced that modern scientists are still studying it, still trying to unlock its secrets, still wondering how something so simple could prove so enduring. The genius of Roman concrete is not only in its ingredients, but also in how it interacts with time. Ordinary modern concrete, the kind that shapes our cities, our bridges, our highways, tends to degrade within a century. It cracks, it weathers, and salt water eats away at it, until the steel inside corrodes. But Roman concrete, remarkably, does something different. Instead of weakening as centuries pass, it seems to grow stronger. When cracks appear, the minerals inside the mixture react with water and carbon dioxide, gradually sealing those gaps, almost like the concrete is healing itself. It is a material not of decay, but of renewal. One of the earliest known large-scale uses of Roman concrete was in harbor construction. The Romans, always ambitious, dreamed of controlling not just land but sea. To achieve that, they needed harbors that could withstand the endless pounding of waves. Modern seawalls today crumble and require constant reinforcement, yet Roman breakwaters built 2,000 years ago are still found beneath Mediterranean waters, almost as strong as the day they were made. When volcanic ash mixed with seawater, something remarkable happened. Instead of dissolving, the mixture encouraged the growth of new crystals, minerals such as tobermorite, which interlocked within the concrete, strengthening it over time. It was as if the sea, instead of destroying the Roman harbors, became a partner in preserving them. The Romans themselves may not have understood every detail of this chemistry, but they observed its effects, and observation was enough. Their builders knew that this mixture could defy the elements, so they used it everywhere: temples, baths, aqueducts, bridges, theaters. Wherever permanence was desired, concrete became the invisible skeleton beneath the stone facades. To the eyes of ancient citizens, it was marble that impressed, or granite columns, or gilded statues. But beneath that beauty was always the same quiet foundation, a gray material that made such grandeur possible. If we pause for a moment inside the Pantheon, we can see the material at work. Its dome, the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, remains a wonder. Engineers today marvel at how the Romans managed to pour such a vast structure without collapse. Their method was subtle. They adjusted the mixture as the dome rose higher. At the base, where weight bore down heavily, the concrete was thick, mixed with heavy basalt. Higher up, where stresses lessened, they used lighter pumice. The effect was a dome that seemed impossibly airy, yet immensely strong. Light pours through the oculus at its center, and visitors still crane their necks, still stand in awe, as they did centuries ago. The story of Roman concrete is not just about material science, but about vision. For the Romans, it was not enough to build for the present. Their monuments had to project power into the future, to show not only their citizens, but also the generations yet unborn, that Rome was eternal. Concrete gave them the means to do so. Stone could be quarried, marble could be polished, but these things required endless labor and vast expense. Concrete, on the other hand, could be molded, poured, shaped into arches, vaults, domes, forms that had previously been nearly impossible on a grand scale. It democratized monumentality, allowing Rome to create in decades what other cultures might need centuries to attempt. And yet, despite its ubiquity, Roman concrete nearly disappeared from memory after the fall of the empire. Medieval builders knew of lime mortar, of course, but the special combination of volcanic ash was forgotten. Cathedrals rose in Europe, but they leaned on cut stone, buttresses, and flying arches. It was not until the 18th century that Europe rediscovered hydraulic cements, and only in the 19th did modern concrete re-emerge. By then, Roman methods were a puzzle, and the modern world marched in a different direction, using Portland cement instead. Yet, in an ironic twist, what the modern world created turned out to be weaker than what the Romans had once mastered. Scientists studying Roman concrete today often find themselves humbled. Samples taken from ancient piers or collapsed walls show internal structures that almost seem alive. Crystals forming, voids sealing, fractures healing. The key lies in that volcanic ash, rich in aluminosilicate minerals, which reacts with lime and seawater to create interlocking bonds. Portland cement, by contrast, forms a rigid matrix that resists change but cannot repair itself. The Romans, unknowingly, or perhaps intuitively, built with a material that embraced change, that allowed water to seep in and trigger renewal, that grew stronger precisely because it was imperfect. Think of the symbolism in that. A city like Rome, often broken, invaded, plundered, yet constantly rebuilt, mirrored in its own concrete, which cracked but healed, weakened but renewed. The material and the civilization were reflections of one another. Perhaps that is why so many Roman ruins still rise above us, not merely because of military power or imperial wealth, but because the very material of Rome was designed to endure beyond conquest, beyond ruin, beyond empire. Consider the aqueducts. Some still stand today, their arches striding across the Italian countryside, a reminder of how water was carried across vast distances to supply fountains, baths, and households. These aqueducts, many of which relied on concrete cores, remain so sturdy that parts of them have been incorporated into modern infrastructure. Bridges built of the same material carried legions across rivers. Amphitheaters filled with crowds still echo with the faint memory of voices. Again and again, what we see surviving is not the ornament, but the core. One might ask, why has modern engineering not simply revived Roman concrete? The answer is complicated. Modern concrete is cheap, fast, and predictable. The Romans used volcanic ash, but such ash is not universally available. Pozzolana came from specific regions of Italy, especially around Naples. To replicate it precisely requires access to those same deposits. Still, researchers experiment, and new formulations inspired by Roman methods are being tested. Some even dream of using such materials for marine structures, offshore platforms, and perhaps even extraterrestrial construction, where durability over centuries will matter more than immediate cost. As we walk the ruins of Rome, though, it is easy to forget the chemistry and see only the quiet resilience. Each block of concrete holds a memory. Each arch that still spans, each dome that still curves against the sky, is a whisper from the past. The builders are gone, the empire collapsed, but the material holds its ground, as if it alone remembers the intention to endure. In a way, Roman concrete is a time traveler. It carries us back to an age when emperors sought eternity, when builders imagined their work would stand forever. When the city of Rome called itself the center of the world, their material was not perfect, not flawless, not even fully understood by its makers. But it had a hidden strength, the kind that grew more resilient with each passing century. And perhaps in that way it is the truest legacy of Rome, not its emperors, not its armies, but the quiet gray substance that still outlasts them all. Even today, when engineers examine the cores of ancient harbors, pulling up lumps of Roman concrete from beneath the sea, they find them astonishingly solid. They hold them in their hands, brush away centuries of sediment, and marvel that what was poured in the age of Caesar or Augustus still resists the bite of salt water. Modern engineers, with all their machinery, all their theories, all their precision, find themselves learning once again from the past. The story of Roman concrete reminds us that progress is not always a straight line. Sometimes what we consider modern turns out to be less durable than what was once ancient. Sometimes the true marvels are hidden in plain sight, in the walls that never fall, in the domes that never crack, in the gray material that carries whispers of eternity. And as we stand before those ruins, surrounded by the silence of centuries, we cannot help but wonder, how many of our own structures, built today with our own materials, will still be standing 2,000 years from now? Corral. The city older than the pyramids. Far along the arid coast of Peru, beyond the whisper of waves that have been breaking for millennia, there lies a city whose stones hold a secret far older than the pyramids of Egypt. This is Corral, a place so ancient that it rewrites what we thought we knew about the birth of civilization in the Americas. To walk its dry valleys, to let the desert wind roll over its terraces and sunken plazas, is to step back not just centuries but thousands of years, into a time when organized cities were still rare on Earth. And yet here, in this forgotten basin, people gathered, built, worshipped, and thrived, long before most of the world had even conceived of stone monuments or planned settlements. Corral was first occupied around 2600 BCE, and it flourished for nearly 1,000 years. This means that when the Egyptians were raising their great pyramids along the Nile, The people of Peru were already gathering in vast plazas, conducting rituals, and constructing pyramidal platforms of their own. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt, however, the pyramids of Caral were not tombs. No mummies have been discovered inside. Instead, they appear to have been centers for ritual, music, and the gathering of communities. Theirs was a civilization that seems to have chosen symbols of life over monuments of death, and it is this difference that makes Caral both puzzling and fascinating. Imagine approaching the Supe Valley, where Caral rests. The desert is wide, painted in muted colors of tan and gray, broken only by the river that winds through it like a thin green thread. It is the river that made Caral possible, just as the Nile made Egypt and the Tigris and Euphrates made Mesopotamia. Along its banks, ancient farmers grew cotton, squash, beans, and guava. Cotton especially played a vital role, for while the people of Caral left no evidence of pottery or written script, they left behind woven fabrics and knotted cords. These cords, known as quipu, would become a tool of record-keeping that endured for thousands of years in Andean cultures. It is possible that Caral was among the first societies to experiment with this method of encoding information, marking a milestone in human cognition and communication. The heart of the city sprawls across 150 acres, with 6 massive platform mounds, 2 sunken circular plazas, and dozens of residential structures. Walking its ancient avenues, you can imagine the hum of life, priests chanting in ritual songs, flutes carved from condor bones, filling the air with music, traders moving with woven goods, fishermen bringing in their catches from the Pacific coast only a day's walk away. Caral was alive with energy, a center that drew in people from across the Supe Valley. Though no great armies or warrior iconography appear in its ruins, there is evidence of trade, exchange, and shared culture across a wide network of communities. One of the most extraordinary discoveries at Caral is its musical instruments. Archaeologists have uncovered flutes made of pelican and condor bones, as well as trumpets carved from deer and llama bones. These were not crude tools but finely made, tuned for resonance. Imagine standing in the circular plaza, while a dozen flutes and trumpets sounded together, echoing against the stone walls. Music was central here, perhaps as important to ritual as the construction of temples themselves. This focus on music, on cotton weaving, on ritual, paints a picture of a civilization that valued connection and harmony more than conquest and warfare. And yet Caral's story is not one of complete peace. Archaeological evidence suggests that the people of Caral lived in times of tension, with signs of burned structures and fortifications in surrounding settlements. There is evidence of ritual offerings, some of which included human remains, though not in the sense of mass sacrifice, but rather symbolic burials within the city's sacred spaces. Fire pits, burned offerings, and arranged bones suggest that the people of Caral lived with a sense of cosmic balance, of giving to the gods in exchange for life's necessities. It was a society attuned to the rhythms of the river, the desert, and the sky. When archaeologists first began to study Caral seriously in the late 20th century, they realized that its significance was immense. This was not a village, not a small farming community, but a true city, planned, organized, sustained over centuries. It is considered the cradle of civilization in the Americas, the mother culture from which many later societies, including the mighty Inca, would draw inspiration. Its people mastered irrigation, agriculture, trade, and ritual on a scale previously unimagined in South America's deep past. The pyramids of Caral stand today in weathered silence, their stepped terraces eroded by centuries of wind and sun. But if you look closely, you can still see the careful planning behind them. Some were aligned with the stars, others with the path of the sun. Astronomy, agriculture, and ritual were bound together in a single worldview, one in which the cosmos and human life were intertwined. From the plazas, people could watch the movements of celestial bodies, marking the passage of seasons and the timing of crops. The city was not only a place of residence but also a living observatory, an ancient calendar etched in stone. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Caral is what it lacks. Unlike other ancient civilizations, there is no evidence of warfare, no weapons, no defensive walls around the main city, no depictions of battle. Instead, there are signs of diplomacy, trade, and exchange. Caral's people seem to have understood power differently, not through dominance but through influence, through the weaving of networks that stretched up and down the Andean coast. Fishermen brought their catches inland, farmers sent their cotton outward, and together the people of Caral thrived in mutual dependence. Caral challenges the very idea of what civilization is. We often think of it in terms of kings and conquests, of empires and armies. But here was a city that rose to prominence without any of those trappings. Its pyramids were not mausoleums of pharaohs, but communal stages of ritual. Its wealth was measured not in gold or weapons, but in textiles, music, and trade. Its endurance lasting 1,000 years was not achieved through domination, but through a kind of balance with the land and with others. Over time, however, Caral declined. The river that sustained it began to shift. Droughts may have struck, and surrounding settlements faltered. By around 1800 BCE, the city was largely abandoned. Its plazas fell silent, its flutes no longer played. The desert reclaimed its stones, and for thousands of years, Caral lay hidden, forgotten beneath the sand. It was only in recent decades that archaeologists rediscovered its importance, piecing together a puzzle that revealed a story far older than the pyramids of Giza. Today, standing in Caral, you can feel that silence, but it is not an emptiness. It is the echo of a civilization that understood something profound, that life could be built not only on conquest, but on harmony, on music, on trade, and on shared ritual. Caral is not just a ruin, but a reminder that long before the empires of Rome, long before the temples of Greece, long before even the pharaohs of Egypt, there were people on the Peruvian coast who dreamed in stone, who built pyramids not for kings but for communities, and who left behind a legacy of civilization's earliest heartbeat. The stones of Caral may be weathered, but they still whisper their story. They tell us that civilization is not a straight line but a tapestry, woven in many places, in many ways. And sometimes, its greatest achievements are not the ones carved in grandeur or conquest, but those that chose music over war, ritual over power, and community over kings. In the dry winds of the Supe Valley, the city of Caral still breathes, reminding us that the roots of human civilization run deeper and in more directions than we ever imagined. The enigmatic stone rings of Chichen Itza, ancient Mayan ballgame relics. The Yucatan Peninsula, where the dense forests seem to breathe with their own rhythm, holds secrets that continue to stir wonder in anyone who steps into its shade. Among the countless ruins scattered across this land, few places evoke as much awe as Chichen Itza. Its name alone conjures up images of towering temples, sacred cenotes, and intricate carvings that seem to whisper stories from a world long gone. Yet within this grand city lies something more subtle, and perhaps more mysterious. Two rings of stone, mounted high upon the walls of a great courtyard. They do not shine with the scale of the pyramid of Kukulkan, or with the dark gravity of the sacred cenote. But in their stillness, in their defiance of time, they hold the memory of one of the most enigmatic and symbolic games ever played on Earth. The Maya called it Pak Tel Pak, and to outsiders it might have seemed a mere contest, a ball game, played for sport. But here beneath the sweltering Yucatan sun, it was no simple pastime. It was ritual, politics, war, and even cosmic theater. And the stone rings, carved with serpents twisting their eternal bodies, were not just goals, they were symbols, gates through which life and death could be decided. To understand these rings is to begin to understand the worldview of the Maya, their obsession with cycles, balance, the eternal dance of darkness and light. When you first step into the great ball court at Chichen Itza, the sense of scale is overwhelming. It is the largest and most imposing of all Mesoamerican ball courts, stretching 545 feet in length and 225 feet in width. Its stone walls rise high and sheer, enclosing a space where sound behaves strangely. Clap your hands, and the echo comes back in 9 sharp ripples, bouncing from wall to wall, as if the gods themselves were answering. This acoustic magic wasn't an accident, it was engineered. The Maya were not only architects of stone but architects of sound. To the players who once stood here, the thundering echoes must have carried the weight of celestial approval, or perhaps divine warning. And there, halfway up the sloping walls on either side, stand the stone rings, each one more than 3 meters above the court floor, carved in circular form, their surfaces marked with the head of a serpent. One ring faces the other, staring across the empty air as though daring the players to bridge the impossible gap. To strike a heavy rubber ball through one of these hoops, without the aid of hands or feet, but using only the hips, the forearms, or the thighs, was no easy feat. It was an act of extraordinary skill, endurance, and luck. Even for seasoned players, scoring was a rarity. So rare that when it happened, it was not just a victory, it was a miracle. The rings then were not merely obstacles, they were thresholds. Passing the ball through them echoed the passing of the sun through the heavens, the descent of the stars into the underworld, the endless movement of the cosmos. And the game itself reflected life's fragility, the tension between survival and sacrifice, between triumph and death. To lose could mean disgrace, but sometimes to win meant even more dangerous consequences. For in some versions of the tale, it was the victors who were sacrificed, their blood feeding the gods, their lives exchanged for cosmic balance. To us, this may sound like tragedy, but for the Maya, to be chosen for sacrifice was a gift, an honor beyond measure. In the stone rings of Chichen Itza, life and death were not opposites, they were parts of the same eternal cycle. Imagine the scene as it once was. The stands, now crumbled and overgrown, filled with nobles, priests, and commoners alike. The air thick with heat, the smell of copal incense drifting in curls. A rubber ball weighing nearly 9 pounds, dark and heavy, bouncing against stone with a dull thud. The players, clad in protective gear of leather and cloth, striking the ball with the weight of their bodies, the rhythm echoing like a heartbeat against the walls. Every strike was ritual, every rebound a conversation with the gods. The crowd would murmur in anticipation, their voices swallowed and magnified by the acoustics of the court. And above it all, the stone rings watched, patient, waiting for the rare moment when the ball would pass cleanly through. Yet beyond the spectacle of the game itself lies a deeper story. The ball game was not only a contest, but a myth, reenacted. In the Popol Vuh, the sacred Maya text, the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, were summoned to the underworld to play against the lords of death. The game was treacherous, filled with traps and trials, yet through wit and courage, the twins triumphed, defeating the powers of the underworld and bringing balance back to the cosmos. To the Maya, the ball game was not entertainment, it was the hero twins' story brought to life again and again, an eternal cycle played out on Earth to mirror the struggles of the divine. In this way, the stone rings of Chichen Itza become more than stone. They are cosmic portals, echoing the myths, holding the weight of countless ceremonies. The ball game could settle disputes between rival cities, replacing open warfare with ritualized combat. It could decide succession, establish political dominance, or demonstrate the will of the gods. When you look at those stone rings, you are not looking at relics of a sport, you are looking at the carved boundaries of a sacred theater, a stage where life, myth, and power intersected, and yet the mystery deepens. Why build the rings so impossibly high? In smaller courts across Mesoamerica, the goals were closer to the ground. Here, the rings tower above, demanding a feat nearly impossible. Some scholars suggest that the rings at Chichen Itza were symbolic more than practical, that the ball passing through them was such a rare event that it was more of a cosmic omen than a sporting achievement. Perhaps entire games would pass with no score, the struggle itself carrying the meaning, the effort, the sweat, the bruises, the endurance. These were offerings, acts of devotion, even if the ball never touched the ring. The impossibility was the point. The gods did not need easy victories, they demanded sacrifice and striving. Walk the court today, and you cannot help but feel the weight of silence pressing in. The jungle hums beyond the walls, birds flicker overhead, and the stones radiate the heat of the sun. Yet in the emptiness, you can almost hear the echoes of the ball, the chants of the crowd, the deep intonations of priests. The rings stare down, weathered but intact, holding their secrets in stone. They do not speak, yet they tell more than we can ever fully know. The stone rings also remind us of something else, the extraordinary craftsmanship of the Maya. Each ring was carved from solid limestone, hewn and lifted with astonishing precision. To mount them at such height, aligned perfectly across from each other, required not only engineering but vision. The serpent motifs that coil along their edges speak to the Maya obsession with Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god who embodied cycles, renewal, and celestial power. To pass the ball through the serpent ring was to pass through the body of the god himself, to align human struggle with cosmic order, and in this way, the court becomes not only a place of play, but a map of the heavens. The walls echo with astronomical alignments, the court itself laid out in proportion with celestial movements. The Maya, master astronomers, wove the stars into their cities. The ball court was no exception. It was a universe in miniature, the rings like celestial gates, the game a performance of cosmic balance. What strikes many visitors is how these rings have endured. For centuries, they stood hidden in the jungle, wrapped in vines, their meaning dimmed but not erased. When rediscovered, they seemed like mute curiosities, the remnants of a game long forgotten. But in truth, they are more than curiosities. They are survivors of belief systems that spanned centuries, of rituals that shaped entire civilizations. They are proof that stone can carry memory, that architecture can hold story. And so, standing in the ball court of Chichen Itza, gazing up at the enigmatic stone rings, one begins to sense the depth of what they represent. They are not only relics of sport, but echoes of myth, politics, faith, and human endurance. They remind us that for the Maya, life was not linear but cyclical, always returning, always renewing, victory and defeat, life and death, sacrifice and renewal. All these played out beneath the gaze of the serpent rings. The rings will never tell us all their secrets. They are silent, and yet their silence speaks. They remind us that history is not only written in texts but carved in stone, lived in ritual, echoed in the breath of a ball rebounding in a court. To stand before them is to feel both the distance of time and the closeness of human spirit, the sense that even in a world so far from ours, people sought meaning, balance, and connection to something greater than themselves. And in that search, in the game played beneath the eyes of gods and ancestors, the stone rings of Chichen Itza still stand as guardians, as enigmas, as witnesses to the eternal play between life and the divine. the lost Maya city of Valeriana, an ancient civilization forgotten by time. The humid air of the Yucatan jungle carries with it the weight of secrets, secrets long buried beneath centuries of tangled vines, roots, and stone. Travelers who venture deep into this dense and shifting landscape often describe a peculiar sense of time bending, as though every step forward is also a step backward into the ages of the world. Here, hidden under the endless green canopy, lies the shadow of a city whispered of in fragments and half-stories. Valeriana, a Maya settlement whose name drifts somewhere between memory and myth. Unlike the great and well-mapped cities of Chichen Itza, Palenque, or Tikal, Valeriana does not stand boldly in textbooks or tourist brochures. Instead, it lingers in hints, the whispered testimony of farmers who stumbled on stone terraces, the faint aerial traces of geometric shapes barely visible in satellite images, and the legends carried by modern Maya descendants. To speak of Valeriana is to speak of a place that refuses to fully belong to history or imagination. Those who study the Maya know that their civilization was not defined by a single city, but by a constellation of urban centers scattered across the lowlands and highlands. Each was bound by roads known as sakbiob, white stone causeways that linked communities across vast distances. These roads were lifelines, political, economic, and spiritual, and they remind us that no city existed in isolation. If Valeriana truly stood among them, then it too must have been part of this interconnected world, humming with the rhythms of markets, rituals, and wars. What makes Valeriana so enigmatic is not just the question of where it lies, but why it seems to have slipped into obscurity. Ancient Maya builders left behind temples, pyramids, plazas, and palaces of astonishing permanence. Even when overgrown by jungle, they rise defiantly into the sky. Yet Valeriana, if indeed it was once a thriving city, appears to have been swallowed more completely. This raises questions. Was it abandoned earlier than the great collapse of the Maya around the 9th century? Was it destroyed in conflict, razed so thoroughly that only fragments remain? Or did its name travel while its stones did not, leaving us to chase echoes rather than ruins? Archaeologists piecing together the story often begin with oral tradition. The Maya people who still live across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras carry stories of vanished cities, places where gods once walked, and where ancestors once traded in jade, obsidian, cacao, and feathers. Some of these oral accounts describe cities that were lost overnight, swallowed by the earth, or cursed by deities. The name Valeriana surfaces in these accounts like a ghost, unfamiliar to academic ears but persistent in local memory. One striking possibility is that Valeriana was not a single city, but a name given to a cluster of smaller settlements, communities that left behind less monumental architecture, and thus less enduring ruins. Many Maya towns did not build with the grand limestone blocks seen at Chichen Itza. Instead, they used perishable materials like wood and thatch, which decay quickly in the humid tropics. In such a case, Valeriana could have been more populous than some of the famous ceremonial centers, yet far less visible to archaeologists today. The Maya were masters of adaptation. Their cities were not randomly placed. They were chosen with precision to balance water supply, agricultural land, and sacred cosmology. Some were aligned with solstices and equinoxes, others with the rising of Venus or the path of the Milky Way. If Valeriana existed, one must ask, what celestial or earthly logic brought it into being? Perhaps it was oriented toward caves or cenotes, limestone sinkholes that provided fresh water and were believed to be portals to the underworld. Xibalba. Such features are scattered across the Yucatan and were central to Maya religion. Entire cities were planned around them, as life and death alike revolved around these sacred waters. The name itself, Valeriana, tempts us with its fluidity. Some argue it is not truly Maya at all, but a Spanish corruption of a local word. During the colonial era, friars and chroniclers transcribed indigenous names with little care for precision. Entire lineages and places were distorted through the filter of European ears. Valeriana might then be a fragment of something else, a syllable misheard, a word mistranslated, a city remembered in spirit but renamed in error. And yet, every fragment matters. In 2016, a teenager scanning satellite images made headlines when he suggested a lost Maya city might lie hidden in southern Mexico. Though experts debated the evidence, it demonstrated how modern tools like LiDAR, light detection and ranging, are rewriting what we know. With LiDAR, aircraft can strip away the jungle canopy to reveal the faint outlines of roads, plazas, and terraces invisible to the naked eye. Dozens of previously unknown Maya settlements have been discovered this way, including sprawling complexes of astonishing size. The story of Valeriana could one day shift from whispered possibility to confirmed map point, revealed not by machetes in the jungle, but by beams of invisible light cutting through foliage. Until that day, Valeriana remains a meditation on what it means to be forgotten. We tend to think of civilizations as monolithic, but history is always selective. The names we remember, Chichen Itza, Palenque, Uxmal, are but a handful among hundreds, perhaps thousands of settlements that rose and fell. For every pyramid standing tall, there were countless wooden homes, marketplaces, and villages that have long returned to the earth. Valeriana could be one of these, not exceptional in scale, but invaluable in meaning. If we imagine walking its streets, we would hear the chatter of traders offering cacao beans as currency, the calls of macaws overhead, the clatter of obsidian blades in workshops. Children would chase one another through the dust, while priests, cloaked in feathers, prepared rituals timed to the heavens. Farmers would bring maize from terraced fields, women would grind corn into masa on stone metes, and scribes would paint codices with glyphs recording dynasties, conquests, and omens. None of these people knew their city would be forgotten. To them, Valeriana would have felt eternal. The disappearance of Maya cities often carries a haunting silence. Climate change in the form of prolonged droughts is believed to have played a role in the Great Collapse. Warfare between rival kingdoms also left cities abandoned, their temples unfinished, their plazas overrun by roots. When people left, the jungle did not wait long. Within decades, trees toppled walls, vines crept across carvings, and wildlife returned. For a city like Valeriana, with architecture less monumental than its neighbors, the jungle's reclaiming hand would have been swift and merciless. And so, Valeriana stands as a paradox, forgotten, yet remembered, invisible, yet imagined, erased, yet persistent. It challenges us to expand our understanding of history beyond the monumental and the famous. For the Maya themselves, history was not linear, but cyclical. Time was a wheel, and events repeated in endless rhythms. Perhaps Valeriana's absence from our records is only temporary, a pause before it returns to recognition in another cycle. Even now, local guides whisper about unexcavated mounds, stone foundations beneath the earth, and glyphs half swallowed by moss. Each mound could be a clue, each whisper a thread leading us closer to what was once real. Archaeology thrives on patience, on the willingness to listen as much as to dig. Valeriana may one day emerge, not as a myth, but as a rediscovered truth, a city that was never truly lost, only waiting to be seen again. In the meantime, it belongs to both worlds, the scholarly and the mythical, the historical and the legendary. To speak its name is to keep alive the possibility of discovery, to honor the memory of those whose lives were lived in streets that now lie silent under jungle soil. Valeriana reminds us that human civilization is both fragile and enduring, that memory and forgetting walk side by side, and that every stone, every story, every name carries the weight of those who came before. And as the Yucatan night falls, with the jungle alive and sound, the chirp of insects, the croak of frogs, the distant call of a jaguar, it is not hard to imagine that beneath the roots and shadows, the lost city of Valeriana still breathes, its heart beating faintly, waiting for the moment when its story will once again rise into the light. The mysterious Nazca Lines, ancient geoglyphs that still defy explanation. Across the desert plains of southern Peru, etched into the baked earth, lie some of the most enigmatic creations ever left behind by an ancient civilization. For more than 1,000 years, the lines have endured, straight paths, twisting figures, enormous animals and shapes, stretching across nearly 1,000 square kilometers of arid land. These are the Nazca Lines, massive geoglyphs carved by the people of a long-gone civilization. And despite decades of study, they continue to puzzle archaeologists, historians, and travelers alike. The desert holds its silence. The wind sweeps across a barren plateau, where rainfall is almost non-existent and the soil is hard and dry. It is here, in this vast canvas of dust and stone, that the Nazca people engraved their visions into the ground. The scale is breathtaking. Straight lines stretching for kilometers, spirals and trapezoids spanning wide plains, and animal figures so large that their full form can only be seen from the sky. A hummingbird with outstretched wings, a monkey curling its tail, a spider, delicate and precise, birds with wingspans longer than a football field, and countless lines, angles and paths, all cut into the desert floor. The first question that strikes anyone who sees them is a simple one. Why? Why would an ancient people, without flight, without satellites, without a modern sense of aerial perspective, create something that only makes sense from above? Were the figures offerings to the gods, astronomical calendars, markers of water sources? Or were they messages, symbols meant for beings beyond the human world? To begin unraveling the mystery, we have to look at the people who made them, the Nazca civilization. Flourishing between 200 BCE and 600 CE, the Nazca were not a mighty empire like the later Incas. Instead, they were a collection of chiefdoms spread across valleys in southern Peru. They farmed in a harsh land where water was scarce, using ingenious underground aqueduct systems called pucuyos to bring life to their crops of maize, beans, and squash. Their world was one of survival against the desert, and the rituals they practiced often centered around ensuring fertility, rainfall, and balance between human life and the forces of nature. In this context, the lines begin to take on meaning. One of the most common interpretations is that the Nazca Lines were sacred pathways. Many of the straight lines seem to converge on ceremonial sites, like the ancient city of Cahuachi, which was a center of religious activity. Pilgrims may have walked along these lines during rituals, offering prayers and sacrifices to the gods above. From the ground, the lines might not have looked like animals at all, but as processional paths, they guided footsteps across the desert toward sacred destinations. But what about the animals? Why carve a hummingbird large enough to stretch over 300 feet? Or a monkey? Or a spider? Or a condor? To the Nazca, animals were more than just creatures. They were symbols of power, fertility, and cosmic order. The hummingbird, still revered in Andean cultures today, was linked to life and renewal, appearing during times of bloom. The monkey, not native to the desert but familiar through trade and cultural exchange, symbolized the lush forests of the Amazon and the life-giving rain carried from there. The spider, precise in its web, may have represented water and fertility. Still, one can't help but feel the pull of other possibilities. The precision of the lines is astonishing. Some stretch perfectly straight across hills and valleys, maintaining their trajectory over uneven terrain. How could the Nazca, without modern surveying equipment, achieve such accuracy? Archaeologists believe they used simple tools, stakes, ropes, and careful planning. Teams would mark points, connect them, and scrape away the reddish topsoil to reveal the lighter earth beneath. In theory, it's straightforward, but in practice, the scale and number of the geoglyphs, there are more than 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and 70 animal and plant designs, make it a staggering accomplishment. Even with this explanation, the mystery deepens. The figures were made to be seen from above, yet the Nazca had no way to fly. Some have suggested that they built observation platforms, low wooden towers from which parts of the figures could be viewed, but even from such vantage points, the full designs would have been invisible. It is as though the creators were imagining a perspective beyond their reach. This strangeness has, unsurprisingly, attracted theories far outside conventional archaeology. Erich von Däniken, in his famous book Chariots of the Gods, proposed that the lines were landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors, or messages meant to be seen by beings from the sky. Others have speculated about ancient hot air balloons, suggesting that perhaps the Nazca briefly achieved flight themselves. While such theories capture the imagination, evidence for them is thin. Most archaeologists remain grounded in the idea that the lines were spiritual in nature, tied to water, fertility, and the cycles of life. And yet, the allure of the unknown remains. To walk along the desert plateau is to be surrounded by puzzles etched into the earth. From the ground you see lines stretching endlessly, vanishing toward the horizon. You follow one, feeling the crunch of dry soil beneath your feet, the desert sun beating down, and the emptiness pressing in on all sides. Then you imagine rising above, into the air, where suddenly the plain resolves into shapes, animals, spirals, vast wings and tails like a secret message revealed only to those who can look from the heavens. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Nazca Lines is their preservation. Why are they still here, more than 1,500 years after they were made? The answer lies in the environment. The Nazca Desert is one of the driest places on Earth, with almost no rainfall. The wind is minimal, and the ground is covered in a layer of dark pebbles that, when scraped away, reveal a lighter clay beneath. Once carved, the designs remained untouched, protected by the very harshness of the desert that made life so difficult for the Nazca people. Even so, the lines are fragile. Modern threats, urban expansion, road building, and even careless tourism pose risks. In 2014, an international incident erupted when activists walked across part of the desert near one of the most famous figures, the hummingbird, leaving footprints and damage that scarred the ancient geoglyph. It was a stark reminder that what has survived for centuries can be lost in moments. New technology is also adding to the mystery. In recent years, researchers using drones and satellite imagery have discovered previously unknown figures hidden among the lines. Some are smaller, harder to see from above, but they expand the known library of designs, more animals, more shapes, more questions. It seems that the desert still has secrets to reveal, waiting for those with the tools to look closely enough. The Nazca Lines have become more than an archaeological puzzle. They are a symbol of human imagination, an expression of belief, art, and mystery left by a people whose voices are otherwise faint in history. Unlike the Incas, the Nazca left no great stone cities or vast empires. Their legacy is written in the desert itself, in figures so large and so strange that they continue to draw the gaze of the world. And perhaps that is the most remarkable thing. The Nazca Lines were not meant for us. They were not intended for cameras, satellites, or tourists in airplanes. They were part of a dialogue between a people and their gods, between human beings and the forces of nature that governed their lives. And yet, across time, across centuries of silence, they still speak. To stand in the Nazca Desert is to feel small. The lines stretch around you, older than memory, enduring in the sand. Above, the sky opens wide, the same sky the Nazca once prayed to, the same sky that holds the sun, the stars, the rains, and perhaps the answers we may never know. Were they calendars, processional paths, offerings, or something beyond all of this? The truth remains elusive, but the mystery is part of their power. The desert holds its secrets tightly, and the Nazca Lines remain, vast, silent, enduring, etchings in the earth that connect us not only to an ancient people but to the timeless human urge to reach beyond, to create symbols larger than ourselves, to leave marks that endure in the silence of the world. The White Shaman Mural, ancient rock art of Texas' hidden past. The desert of southwest Texas does not shout its history, it whispers. Wind moves slowly through canyons cut deep into limestone. Sunlight lays over stone like a heavy cloth, bleaching colors and sharpening shadows. For most travelers, the landscape feels empty, bare ridges, sparse brush, and the long dry reach of the Rio Grande. But hidden on a canyon wall, in a place known as the Lower Pecos, a mural has waited for thousands of years. It is called the White Shaman Mural, and it is one of the most striking pieces of ancient rock art in North America. At first glance, it may appear like faded lines and figures against a rock face. White streaks, red forms, traces of black and yellow, yet look longer, and something emerges. A painted world, a sacred vision left by people who lived in this desert nearly 4,000 years ago. The mural is not simple decoration. It is an echo of belief, a window into a way of seeing life, death, and the cosmos. And even now, archaeologists and researchers still puzzle over what it truly means. To stand before the mural is to feel time fold. The canyon around you is quiet, but once it was alive with families, hunters, and shamans who carried stories in their voices and symbols in their hands. The rock became their canvas. The pigments, ground from minerals and plants, were their ink. And the wall of the canyon became something more than stone. It became a portal. The mural stretches across a surface nearly 26 feet wide. At its center is the figure that gives it its name, the White Shaman, a tall form painted in pale color, arms spread wide, head crowned with what seems like rays or feathers. Around it are other figures, human-like shapes, animal outlines, abstract forms that seem to shift between the earthly and the otherworldly. To some, the White Shaman appears as a guiding figure, a messenger, perhaps even a deity. To others, it is a shaman in the act of transformation, standing at the threshold between the human world and the spirit realm. The Lower Pecos Canyonlands hold hundreds of such murals. Caves and overhangs along the Rio Grande and its tributaries preserve panels of art painted thousands of years ago. Each site holds its own cluster of figures, often layered, complex, and symbolic. But the White Shaman mural stands apart. Its scale, its complexity, and its preservation make it one of the most important works of prehistoric art in North America. When researchers first began to study it in detail, they quickly realized it was not random. The figures are arranged deliberately, connected by lines and patterns that suggest narrative. The mural seems to tell a story, but whose story? And what story? Some scholars interpret it as a record of ritual. The figures may represent shamans undertaking visions, perhaps under the influence of peyote, a sacred cactus known to the region. Others see in it the outlines of myth, stories of creation and destruction, journeys between life and death. There are images that seem to echo fertility, harvest, and the cycles of the natural world. One interpretation suggests that the mural encodes a sacred journey. 5 human-like figures appear along the panel, connected by lines of red. At the center, the White Shaman seems to orchestrate the transition between this world and the next. The surrounding imagery may describe a cosmic struggle or the process of death and rebirth. In this reading, the mural is not simply art, it is scripture in color and stone. The people who painted it were hunter-gatherers. They lived in small groups, moving with the seasons, following the resources the land provided. They left behind not cities or temples, but these murals, vast and enduring expressions of belief. In a landscape where survival was never easy, the murals suggest a people deeply invested in the spiritual, weaving meaning into the world around them. The pigments were carefully made. Red came from hematite, black from charcoal, yellow from clay, white from gypsum. Mixed with animal fat or plant oils, the paints adhered to stone with surprising durability. For thousands of years, through rains, winds, and heat, the figures have survived. Faded, yes, but still visible, still powerful. To stand before the mural today is to feel the presence of those who made it. Imagine the moment it was created. A shaman, perhaps, standing with brush in hand. A group gathered behind, chanting or drumming softly. The shaman touches the stone. marking a figure, then stepping back, then adding more. Over hours, or days, the wall fills with meaning. A ritual is not only spoken or danced, it is painted, fixed into the rock. For archaeologists, the mural is a puzzle. There are no written records from the people who made it, no texts to explain the figures, only the art itself and the context of the culture that surrounded it. Some researchers look to surviving traditions of indigenous peoples across the Americas to seek clues. Many native groups speak of journeys into other realms, of spirits, of transformation. The white shaman mural may reflect a worldview shared across a wide landscape, but it may also be unique, a local story, a vision specific to the people of the Lower Pecos. In that sense, it is both deeply mysterious and profoundly human, an expression that resists easy translation, but resonates with anyone who has wondered about life beyond the visible world. The canyon where the mural lies is rugged. To reach it requires effort, walking among stone and brush, descending into spaces carved by rivers over millennia. Perhaps that difficulty was intentional. Sacred places are often hidden, requiring a journey to reach. The mural was not meant for casual viewing. It was a destination, a place of ceremony, a place where the veil between worlds felt thin. When you look closely, you see details that deepen the mystery. Figures with antler-like appendages, shapes that seem like serpents, winding across the panel, clusters of dots and lines that may mark counting or cycles. Each element suggests symbolism, layers of meaning that would have been clear to those who lived then, but are now obscured by time. Some scholars argue that the mural may depict a creation myth, the birth of the world through conflict and sacrifice. Others see it as a guide for shamans, a map of the journey into the spirit world and back. Still others believe it could be tied to astronomical cycles, encoding the movement of the sun and stars in symbolic form. Whatever its meaning, the white shaman mural is a reminder that even in places we might consider desolate, human imagination flourished. In the harsh desert of southwest Texas, a people created art of astonishing depth and beauty, carrying their beliefs forward into stone. Today, the mural is protected. Access is guided, limited, so that the site can endure. Visitors stand quietly before it, guided by archaeologists who explain what is known and what remains unknown. For many, the experience is transformative. The canyon is silent, the mural glows faintly in the filtered light, and in that moment, the boundary between past and present feels blurred. The white shaman mural does not answer questions easily. It does not explain itself, but it does invite us to wonder. Who were these people? What did they see in their visions? What compelled them to climb to this wall, mix pigments, and paint a story that would endure for millennia? Perhaps the mural is less about what it tells us, and more about what it asks of us, to pause, to imagine, to consider that thousands of years ago, people stood in this same canyon, looking at the same wall, with the same questions about existence, spirit, and meaning. The white shaman still spreads its arms. The figures still march across the panel. The colors, though faint, still burn with significance, and the desert wind still whispers, carrying with it the echo of a hidden past, one that will never be fully explained, but will always invite us deeper into mystery. The Mount Owen Claw, a prehistoric relic frozen in time. Deep in the rugged wilderness of New Zealand, far from the bustle of modern life, lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries ever made. A relic so perfectly preserved that it seemed to defy the passage of thousands of years. This is the story of the Mount Owen Claw, a mysterious prehistoric artifact unearthed in a hidden cave. A claw belonging to a creature thought long gone from the living world. Its discovery raised questions that stretched far beyond science, touching on myth, extinction, and the lingering memory of lost beasts. The year was 1986. A team of explorers pushed deep into the dark, winding passages of Mount Owen Cave on New Zealand's South Island. The cave was damp, silent, and heavy with the scent of minerals and untouched earth. Moving cautiously, the team expected the usual: stalactites, limestone formations, and perhaps fragments of small bones left behind by long-dead birds or rodents. What they found instead seemed almost impossible. There, lying in the dust, was something massive, curled and unmistakably organic. At first glance, it resembled the talon of a gigantic bird, with long curved claws still sheathed in leathery skin. The claw looked alive, as if it had been plucked from a creature only days before. Its scales were still intact, its keratin covering untouched. The explorers were stunned. How could something so fresh-looking have survived in this cave for thousands of years? It was later identified as the foot of a moa, an enormous flightless bird that once roamed New Zealand in herds. These birds could stand up to 12 feet tall and weigh over 500 pounds. For centuries they had been the giants of the island, feeding on leaves, fruits, and branches, shaping the landscape through their grazing. Yet by the year 1400, they had been hunted to extinction by the first Polynesian settlers of New Zealand, the Maori. Or so it was believed. The Mount Owen claw was radiocarbon dated, and the results stunned researchers. This was no recent death. The claw was at least 2,000 years old, preserved by the unique climate of the cave, sealed away from sunlight, humidity, and the destructive work of decay. Its condition was so perfect that some wondered if Moa might still have lived much later than historians thought. Could small hidden populations have survived high in the mountains, unseen by human eyes, long after the rest of their kind had vanished? The Maori themselves spoke of massive birds in their oral traditions, creatures known as puakai or hokioi. Legends described them as powerful, even dangerous, capable of attacking humans. Some stories may have been rooted in encounters with the last Moa, fading slowly into memory. For centuries these tales were dismissed as myth, but the Mount Owen claw seemed to whisper otherwise, suggesting that the timeline of Moa extinction might be more complex than we once believed. Imagine stumbling upon this discovery yourself, kneeling in the dim glow of your lantern, brushing away centuries of dust, only to uncover the claw of a bird so immense that its step could have shaken the forest floor. To hold such a thing is to touch deep time itself. It bridges the gap between the present and a world before history, when giant birds still walked the earth. The claw itself tells us much about the Moa. Unlike other flightless birds such as ostriches or emus, Moa had no wings at all, not even tiny remnants. Their bodies had adapted entirely for a grounded life. Yet their claws remained strong, capable of tearing through soil, pulling branches, and defending themselves against predators. In life, their only natural enemy would have been the Heist's eagle, the largest eagle species ever to exist, with talons so powerful that they could pierce the flesh of these giant birds. But with the arrival of humans, the Moa's fate was sealed. The early Polynesian settlers who became the Maori found in the Moa a rich source of food. Its meat could sustain entire villages, and its bones were shaped into tools and ornaments. Within a few centuries, hunting pressure combined with habitat destruction wiped them from the land forever, or so the story goes. The Mount Owen claw suggests that extinction may not have been so sudden, that perhaps small groups lingered in remote pockets, slowly dwindling until they vanished. Today the claw rests as a silent witness in a museum collection, one of the most photographed and talked about relics of New Zealand's natural past. Its preservation is almost miraculous. Scales, tendons, and skin perfectly frozen in time. Visitors who see it often describe a shiver running down their spine. It looks less like a fossil and more like the severed foot of some living beast. A warning from the shadows of prehistory. The mystery of the claw also raises an even larger question. How much of our natural history remains hidden? If a creature as massive as the Moa could vanish within a few generations, what other species, less noticeable, less studied, may already be gone, their remains sleeping in caves, swamps, or beneath the forest floor? New Zealand is a land of such secrets. Its isolation fostered unique creatures, from giant insects to birds that grew to monstrous size in the absence of mammals. The Moa and its predator, the Heist's eagle, were ecological marvels, a balance of giants lost forever. And yet, when explorers uncovered the Mount Owen claw, it felt as though a fragment of that lost world had reached forward through time to remind us it was real. For scientists, it is a clue about extinction, evolution, and preservation. For others, it is almost mythological, a talon that seems alive, conjuring visions of creatures that might still walk unseen in the wild. For everyone who gazes upon it, it is a reminder of nature's fragility, and of how quickly even the most powerful can fall to silence. The Mount Owen claw remains one of the most astonishing relics of the prehistoric world, a story told not in stone, but in preserved flesh and skin. It is not just a claw, it is a time capsule, a messenger from an age when giants roamed New Zealand's forests, and a haunting reminder of what it means to lose them. And so it waits, behind glass, preserved for generations to see, to question, to wonder. Not just about what was lost, but about what else remains hidden, waiting to be found in the dark places of the earth. The crocodile stone. An ancient enigma of Sri Lanka. Have you ever stood before a stone and felt as though it was watching you? Not in the way a carved statue gazes with empty eyes, but as though the weight of time itself was alive in its cracks, its shadows, and its silence. In the heart of Sri Lanka, there lies such a stone. Locals call it the crocodile stone. It is neither temple nor tomb, nor palace nor shrine. It sits, heavy and still, its rough surface etched with strange patterns and its outline shaped in a form eerily reminiscent of the great reptile that has haunted rivers and jungles since the dawn of human memory. What is this stone? Why does it resemble a creature of flesh though it is born of rock? And why, after so many centuries, do people still whisper about it in hushed tones, as though the act of speaking might disturb something that should never be disturbed? This is not the story of an artifact neatly displayed in a museum, carefully labeled and explained. This is the story of a mystery half buried in moss and silence. The crocodile stone is an enigma, one that sits at the crossroads of history and myth, between the solid ground of archaeology and the shifting waters of legend. Tonight we will walk slowly toward it, exploring the landscape that holds it, the stories that cling to it, and the unsettling aura that makes it more than just an ancient rock. So let us begin. Let us wander into the jungles of Sri Lanka, to stand before a stone that has watched centuries pass, silent and patient, like the creature it resembles. The first thing you notice when you hear about the crocodile stone is how little is actually known about it. Sri Lanka is an island drenched in history, where ancient kingdoms rose and fell, where temples crowned the mountains and cities shimmered with white stone. Kings built vast reservoirs, monks carved statues out of cliffs, and foreign traders marveled at the pearls and spices found in the bustling ports. But this stone is not mentioned in the chronicles with the same clarity. It appears almost as an afterthought, a half-remembered marker of something older than the kingdoms themselves. It is said to lie in a place where the jungle presses close, where vines twist like snakes and the air carries the weight of humidity. The stone itself is long, its surface eroded by rain and time. Yet when you look at it from a certain angle, its shape resembles the head of a crocodile, a blunt snout, ridged brows, the suggestion of eyes forever staring toward the horizon. It is too precise to be dismissed as chance, but too rough to be the polished work of sculptors. Was it carved by human hands? Or was it simply adopted by them, a natural rock formation that ancient people recognized and gave meaning to? That is the first layer of mystery, because across the world humans have always seen shapes in stone. We see animals in clouds, faces in mountains, spirits in trees. But sometimes those shapes are not merely imagination. Sometimes they are enhanced, worked upon, or marked in subtle ways by hands long gone. The crocodile stone carries that uneasy balance. It could be entirely natural, or it could be deliberate, or it could be something in between. To understand why a stone in the shape of a crocodile would matter in Sri Lanka, we need to remember what crocodiles meant to ancient people. The crocodile has always been a creature of thresholds. It lives in water and on land, moving between them as easily as breathing. It is patient, still, and silent until it strikes with terrifying speed. For early societies, crocodiles embodied danger, mystery, and the unknown. They were symbols of hidden strength, of the world beneath the surface. In Sri Lanka, crocodiles are not merely legends. They are real, formidable beasts that haunted the rivers, the tanks, and the marshes. Farmers saw them, fishers feared them, travelers whispered about them. To imagine a stone shaped like a crocodile is to imagine something that mirrors life itself, a guardian, a warning, perhaps even a sacred symbol. Some suggest that the crocodile stone was a boundary marker, a sign to travelers that they were entering a special or dangerous place. Others say it was a shrine, a place where offerings were left to appease the river spirits. Still others whisper that it was part of something greater, a fragment of a lost temple, one where animal deities were honored in forms now forgotten. And yet, there is another possibility. Archaeologists studying similar stones in South Asia have found that some were aligned with celestial events. A rock shaped like a crocodile could perhaps have doubled as a marker for the movement of the stars, or as a calendar carved into nature itself. Imagine a priest standing before the stone as the first light of dawn struck its eye, reading omens in the sunlight, telling the people when to plant, when to harvest, when to pray. The crocodile was not only a beast of rivers, it was also a beast of the heavens, linked in some traditions with constellations, with time itself. The crocodile stone might therefore have been more than an idol. It might have been a clock, a teacher, a reminder of the order that bound heaven, earth, and water together. Yet none of these theories are certain, and perhaps that is why the stone unsettles those who encounter it. Certainty is what we crave when we look at the past. We want to know who carved, why they carved, what it meant. The crocodile stone offers none of that. It sits mute and weathered, as though it does not care what we think of it. But the people around it cared. Legends cling to it, growing like vines. Some say that the stone was once alive, that it was a crocodile turned to rock by a curse, frozen in the moment it tried to cross from one world to another. Others believe it guards something hidden beneath it, a treasure buried deep in the soil, or an entrance to the underworld. Farmers have long avoided disturbing the earth too close to it, afraid that to do so would awaken whatever force the stone contains. Children are warned not to climb on it, not to linger near it when the sun sets. Travelers passing through the area tell stories of hearing strange sounds, the splash of water though no river flows nearby, the low growl of something watching though no beast is in sight. It is easy to dismiss these stories, and yet when you stand before the crocodile stone yourself, the dismissing becomes harder. Close your eyes and imagine it. The jungle hums with insects, the air is thick, the ground damp, vines brush your arms as you walk through the undergrowth. The light is dim, filtered through heavy green leaves, and then ahead of you, it appears, a long stone, moss-covered, its shape uncanny. The blunt snout, the ridged head, the suggestion of a jawline. For a moment your mind refuses to accept it as mere stone. You see the creature it echoes, waiting and watching, patient as eternity. The longer you stare, the more alive it feels, and even when you step closer and touch its rough, weathered surface, a part of you wonders if it might one day breathe again. This is the power of the crocodile stone. Sri Lanka is full of such enigmas. Across the island, stones rise in strange shapes, temples hide in caves, inscriptions whisper in languages half erased by time. The crocodile stone belongs to this tapestry of half-seen history. Perhaps one day scholars will study it more closely. Perhaps they will find tool marks or alignments or buried offerings that reveal its purpose. Or perhaps it will remain forever silent, defying explanation, content to exist as it has for centuries, a question without an answer. And maybe that is the point. Not every relic is meant to be solved. Some are meant to remind us that the past is bigger than our understanding, that mystery is as much a part of human heritage as knowledge. The crocodile stone lies in Sri Lanka, silent and patient, as it always has. Whether it was carved or born by chance, whether it is sacred or cursed, whether it is a relic of kings or of commoners, it endures, and when you walk away from it, back into the jungle, you carry with you the unsettling sense that something ancient has watched you go, something that does not need to explain itself, something that will still be there, long after we are gone. The ritual spoon of the Isle of Man, a 2,000-year-old prophecy relic. They say that sometimes history hides its truths in the smallest of objects, not in towering monuments or vast ruined cities, but in something you could hold in your hand. Something simple, ordinary, but whispered through by centuries of use, ritual, and forgotten meaning. On a quiet island in the Irish Sea, between the sweeping shores of Britain and the rugged coastlines of Ireland, archaeologists uncovered such an object. It was not gold, nor a jewel meant to dazzle kings. It was a spoon carved nearly 2,000 years ago, worn smooth by time, and carrying with it a mystery that is still not fully understood. The Isle of Man, with its windswept hills and ancient stone circles, has always carried an air of the in-between, a place half rooted in the mortal world and half listening to whispers from another realm. For centuries, legends have swirled across its shores, of druids, of Viking raiders, of fairies hidden in the glens. To find here a spoon, linked to ritual, prophecy, and blood, it feels almost too fitting, as though the island itself had chosen to guard this relic until the moment was right to reveal it again. Tonight, let us walk slowly through the story of this spoon. We will trace the land it came from, the people who may have used it, the rites it might have belonged to, and along the way we will settle into the soft quiet of ancient history, where the smallest artifacts speak with the loudest voices. The Isle of Man is not large. It stretches just 30 miles from north to south, 10 miles across at its widest. Yet this small island has been home to layers upon layers of history. Neolithic farmers raising stone monuments, Bronze Age smiths casting tools and ornaments, Celtic chieftains weaving power from ritual and belief. Later came Norse settlers who brought their gods and laws, leaving behind runestones and boat burials. And across the centuries, these cultures mixed, shaping a place that was neither wholly Irish, nor British, nor Scandinavian, but something of all of them. It is into this layered past that the spoon fits. Archaeologists suggest it dates from around 2,000 years ago, placing it somewhere in the later Iron Age, perhaps the same centuries when Druids were said to walk the Isles, when Rome was pressing into Britain, and when local tribes lived with a closeness to ritual that modern life has all but forgotten. A spoon seems an unassuming thing. We think of it as domestic, for eating or mixing. Yet this spoon, found in a burial context, was no ordinary implement. Its form was carefully made, its size precise, and its placement intentional. Some scholars suggest it may have been used not for food, but for ritual, to stir, to measure, perhaps even to hold blood. Blood rituals. The phrase alone sends a shiver through the imagination. But in the ancient world, blood was not viewed with the horror modern sensibilities attached to it. Blood was life itself, the vital stream that flowed through people, animals, perhaps even the land, to pour it, to collect it, to stir it. These were acts that touched the very essence of existence. Could this spoon have been a tool of prophecy? Imagine for a moment a ritual gathering on the Isle of Man 2,000 years ago. The wind sweeps across the grassy hilltops, carrying the cry of seabirds. A small group of figures stands near a stone circle, cloaked in woven fabrics, their faces half shadowed by firelight. In their hands they carry offerings, meat, mead, perhaps even the blood of a sacrifice. At the center stands a figure of authority, perhaps a druid, who takes the spoon. Into a shallow bowl is poured liquid wine, ale, or blood. The spoon dips, stirs, lifts, scatters droplets. A pattern forms. A sign is read. This may sound strange to us now, but in many cultures, prophecy was sought in fluids, whether wine, oil, or blood. The way droplets spread, the way colors shifted, the ripples that formed, these were believed to carry messages from the gods or from the unseen world. On the Isle of Man, with its blend of Celtic and Norse traditions, such acts would have fit easily into the rhythm of life. The discovery of the spoon was made with care, as most archaeological finds are. Excavation on the island often reveals fragments of daily life, pottery sherds, tools, jewelry. But when this spoon emerged from the soil, archaeologists paused. Its shape was intact, its material preserved enough to study, and most importantly, it was found in association with ritual deposits, lending weight to the idea that it was no mere dining implement. The spoon itself, from descriptions, is simple but elegant, slightly elongated, shaped for dipping, with a handle smoothed from much handling. Its balance suggests it was made not quickly, but with intention, and intention, in archaeology, matters. People do not spend time crafting something with such precision unless it is meant to hold meaning. From this, theories grew. One is that it was part of divination, a set of ritual spoons perhaps, used in pairs. One spoon to pour, one to stir, one to catch. Another is that it was used in rites of healing, to measure herbs, to mix elixirs, to apply liquid to wounds. In both cases, the spoon carries a weight beyond mere sustenance. It becomes a mediator between the physical and the spiritual. The Isle of Man has long been seen as a liminal place, a threshold between worlds. Its mythology tells of beings who dwell in the mists, of doors opening between mortal and otherworld. Even today, locals will greet the fairies with a kind word when crossing certain bridges, keeping alive the old respect. To imagine ritual spoons being used here, in ceremonies, seeking guidance, prophecy, or healing, feels entirely natural. Let us linger a moment in one such imagined scene. It is twilight, and the air is heavy with the smell of burning wood. A group of islanders gathers near a cairn, their faces solemn. At the center sits a figure with the spoon. A bowl is brought forth, filled with liquid. Slowly, deliberately, the spoon dips and stirs. All eyes watch as the liquid swirls. Tiny patterns form, and the figure leans close, murmuring words none but they can understand. The group waits, holding its breath, until the verdict is spoken. Perhaps a good harvest, perhaps a warning, perhaps the fate of a journey at sea. In that moment, the spoon is not a utensil, it is a vessel of fate. When we consider such relics, it is easy to let the imagination run wild. But even in sober archaeological terms, the spoon remains significant. It connects us to daily acts that blurred the line between the ordinary and the sacred. In a world without sharp divisions between religion, medicine, and survival, an object like this could be all three at once. 2,000 years have passed since that spoon was carved. The hands that once held it are gone, their stories mostly lost. Yet the spoon remains, whispering fragments of a ritual language we can almost but not quite decipher. The Isle of Man continues to guard its mysteries. Its hills are dotted with ancient burial mounds, stone circles, and standing stones. Each one, like the spoon, tells a fragment of a larger story. And perhaps that is the lesson of this relic, that history is not always about grand monuments, but about the small, personal tools that carried meaning in people's lives. So when you think of prophecy, of ritual, of the ancient search for meaning, remember the spoon. Remember that even the humblest of objects may have been, once, the center of a sacred act. And on an island where mist and myth still entwine, the line between utensil and relic, between ordinary and magical, is as thin as a whisper of wind over the sea. This then is the tale of the ritual spoon of the Isle of Man, 2,000 years old, forged with care, perhaps once dipped into blood, perhaps once lifting prophecy from liquid to lips. It is a small relic with a vast echo, an object that turns the everyday into the sacred, and that continues to remind us how much of the ancient world remains just beyond our reach, waiting to be stirred back into memory. The past is filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered, and together we've only scratched the surface. Thanks for watching Timeless Mysteries. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a fellow history explorer. And before you go, drop a comment and let me know which mystery amazed you the most, and where in the world